All right. So, does anyone have a morphology story that they would like to share? It could be an experience, it could be a moment, it could be a pause that you've had in your thinking. Um, Lana, do you have any morphology stories to share today?
Hey, you know what? I am going to actually touch on this one, Charlie, and you can help me out with it too. The word is astrology. Okay.
Okay.
So in my study with this astro, so I'm thinking I'm going to break this word up into like astro and the like ology on the end or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the reading, found that the O in the middle, so the vowel, the O, can actually be like a connector vowel that it
Ooh.
doesn't. Yeah. So I need to dive in a little bit more because I was thinking I'm going to be checking this word astro, right? But when you actually at the join for astrology, the O is actually a connector vowel in the morphological world. So
Interesting.
I need to take a deeper dive in that because whoa, that was, yeah, it kind of hit me, right? And if it's not astro, then what is it? Right?
Astro.
Yeah. So what is it? Right. So anyway, that was kind of an
Some sort of a bound base, I'm gonna guess.
yeah, yeah. So I got to take a dive into that, but that was interesting to me. So that there can be vowel markers in the middle of words, right? That kind of link.
Yes. Connecting vowels. It's one of our suffixes,
That's right.
just to throw a wrench into things. I had a great time at the Central Alberta Teachers Convention. I did two different sessions related to morphology. So one was morphology in middle school and how we can use morphology with our big kiddos. And the other one was how can we use morphology in really K to 6 and start exploring words and language with our students. But the one activity that I had the teachers do in the middle school session, which is very much like the ones that we do together, was I shared an excerpt of the text and asked folks to pick a word and then how do you think it's built and what other words do you think are in the family? And so the word happened to be crinkle, like the paper was crinkly. I think crinkly was the word. So they pulled out crinkle, and then her question was, so is crinkle the base or is the base crink? And of course, my favorite answer, I don't know, but we should look that up. And so being able to engage in these kinds of conversations with no answer in my pocket because I didn't think she was going to be asking me questions about the word crinkle. But what I discovered was the word crinkle is connected to the word cringe. And so they share some sort of I think it's a Latin root. Um, Not where I thought that was going to go at all. So, like sometimes when we're digging into the etymology of words, um, it takes us in places that maybe we didn't think we would go. And I had a lot of fun putting together our next 40, oh geez, we're only like 35 minutes left, which was a whole other rabbit hole that I fell down this month, which anyone that's come more than once can't be surprised that that's what happened when I started building this session. I put this slide together, and this isn't really new information, but I wanted to present it in another way for you. So this is the knowledge breakdown for each of the grades in the new ELAL curriculum as related to morphology. Now, kindergarten does not talk about morphology in particular, but it does talk about building vocabulary through a variety of literacy experiences. And so the word sorts and talking about how words are built and looking for certain words that have an S or an ing ending, those would be examples of a literacy experience that you could have with kindergarten students to help grow their vocabulary. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but one of the things that I love about this work is we're not just focusing on one word at a time. We're focusing on a word that could potentially lead us into a whole bunch of other words. So the vocabulary depth that we can reach through word families is pretty amazing. I think it's amazing, and not something that we would have necessarily previously done. I know I didn't do it in my previous experiences. Now, I don't want you to look at this and go, "Oh my God, I teach grade 5 and I'm not doing any of those things." Please don't panic. One of the reasons I want to show you this is because if you don't know where to start, no matter the grade you're in, this gives you a relatively age appropriate progression for orthography understanding, for morphology. So you teach grade 8. You want to start talking about this with your students? Start talking about past tense, plurals, and compound words, because that's the first thing that we're introducing in grade 1. So use this as a little bit of a timeline or a guideline around how deep and how complex you're going to go. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go into those other areas, because inevitably you're going to, as you really start to dig into this work, but it provides a really nice starting place, I think, for anyone that's just not sure.
Charlie, just a quick add to the word family conversation, just
Yeah.
because I know at the early level, to many of those teachers that are teaching kindergarten through grade 2, word families means rhyming families, right? When we talk the word families, it's the at, bat, cat, sat, rat kind of family. But when we're talking morphology, that's different, right? So I know
Yes.
we've done sort of a terminology shift and a language shift with the schools and the teachers that I'm working with, that we do call those now rhyming families. And these are the word families when we talk morphologically and with vocabulary, right? So,
Yeah, that's an important point to make, Lena. And I kind of keep forgetting we continue to have new people join us
mhm.
who haven't experienced the Charlie and Lana show yet. And so one of those pieces absolutely is that when we're talking about word families, we're talking about words that are connected through um, meaning and through its spelling, basically. So just a quick review, remembering that yes, this is called Morphology Monday. Again, we like alliterative titles here. But when we're talking about these pieces, when we're talking about morphology, you can't not talk about phonology and etymology. They're all interconnected. So what we're really talking about here is orthography, which is the entire spelling system. So you're not going to see the word orthography in the curriculum. You see the word morphology. You don't see the word etymology, but you do see the words word origins, and that's what it's talking about. And so really what we're looking at as we do these series and these sessions with you is the whole package. There are times when we lean more into morphology and we're really looking at those parts, the bases, the prefixes and the suffixes. There are other times though where we have to pay attention to the phonology, because that helps us identify the marker that might be present in the. So as Lana mentioned, when we're talking word families, we're talking morphological families. So not rhyming word collections. That's not what's happening here. So to avoid any confusion with your people that you're working with, we highly recommend that you make a shift in how you talk about rhyming collections and then these word families. Word families are connected by a common base element, like the spelling, and a root, the meaning. Um, so part of the word work that we do centers around meaning. If you can't tell me what the word means, you actually can't build the family, because you're not then certain if the words you're making match that word. Um, and so to build a word family, you're going to have some kind of a base. Every word has a base. Sometimes that's all the word is the base. And then we can attach affixes to it to develop out different words that are part of that particular words family. So we're going to play for a few minutes here because I've, of course, realizing I've planned way more stuff than we have physically time to do today. So that's super awesome. Um, we can represent word families in something called a word matrix. And how it works is the middle part of the word matrix right here, SIGN, is the base word, and it's usually bolded. There may be other words in the matrix that are also bolded, and that means that those two base words can come together to build a compound word. When we look at a word matrix, we read it from left to right. You don't have to take an element or a morpheme, a building block, from each column, but you can't skip over the column. So here I can't pick SIGN, skip ATE, and just go to URE. If I want to get to URE, I have to include the column that comes before it. And then we have to make sure we check the joins, because sometimes we have things called conventions, suffixing conventions, that guide us to spell the word correctly on the other side of the word sum. Please notice that I didn't call them rules. So we call them conventions because usually this is what happens. Are there exceptions? Maybe, but there's going to be a reason for that exception. But we do not call them rules. So we talk about spelling conventions, we talk about suffixing conventions. We do not talk about rules. Pete Bowers has this really great analogy about map reading. So if you're given a map and you're out sailing and you come across an island that's not on your map, you don't then say, well, that's an exception. We're just going to ignore that island and keep using the map that you have in front of you. You're going to do something with the island. And so we can have rules that 50% of the words don't fit into or with. And so it's just another way to think about how we talk about spelling with our students so that they understand that it can be systematically explained, that it is not random, it is not willy-nilly, it is not odd, it's explainable. That
And
was my
Charlie,
soapbox.
I was just gonna say too, just if everybody noticed how you read the words or read the affixes, right? That it was SIGN. And so a lot of times in the morphology, when those pieces come together, it's going to cause some change in the sound or the way that we pronounce it. So that
Yes.
when we're reading I guess the morphemes and the morphological things we're seeing in front of us, it is reading it with what you're seeing. So the EASE is what we're seeing, right? So not the
Yeah.
sounds, not the sounds, but the actual letter grapheme.
Right. And that is a super hard habit to break. Like
I
I
know.
catch myself doing it all the time. And
Mhm.
I think if we can give ourselves some grace, we remember this is not about becoming experts before we do the work with our students. It's about building our own capacity and knowledge alongside our students. And that's a very different way of thinking about our role as teachers, I think, sometimes. You don't need to have the answer. You just have to be willing to go along for the learning adventure. Um, so I present to you here a word matrix for the base word EASE, ease, with a definition or root in comfort. What I would like for you to do, anyone who is able, I invite you to build some word sums using this matrix to see what kind of words we can build that would fit in the EASE, ease family. So remember, you're going to go from left to right. You don't have to pick a prefix if you don't want. You can start with the base and just add your suffixes. You can pick a prefix and just add the base, or you can go hog wild and pick something from each column. Another thing to point out is you don't cross these horizontal lines. So I can't go EASE plus MENT and then drop down over here to ER. Can't do that. So you can't cross these lines here. Okay, so take a few minutes, grab a scrap of paper, see what you can come up with for some word sums for the EASE family. So Lana shared UN plus EASE plus Y. Oh, that's a 7, not a Y. Is rewritten as UNEAS. Now, something happens here, Lana, with this word sum. What do you notice in your final spelling of the word, or at the
Well,
join between the
yeah,
base EASE and the Y?
right. I'm dropping that E.
Do you know why you're dropping the E?
Well, something happens when two vowels come together when you're adding a suffix.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess I know the spelling of it, right? So,
And that's where I find some of this work to be challenging because I know what the spelling is supposed to be on the other side. And when I first started doing this work, my colleague would always say, you know, why is this happening? And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure the answer I'm going to give you is wrong, because it's not the real reason, even though, you know, this was the rhyme that I was taught to explain why this is happening or whatever. Cindy, do you have any word sums that you would like to share?
Yep, I have ease plus meant equals easement.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yep. All right. And I'm sure there's lots more. A great, so if you're wondering about what this could look like in your classroom, you can, once you teach students how to read a matrix, throw a matrix up on the board. This could be seat work when they come in. It could be a word workstation if you're doing some sort of station rotation literacy center type stuff in your classroom. Give them the word matrix, see what kind of words they can build, with the caveat that they have to be able to explain what that word means.
mm,
So I can't just write the word easement if I don't know what an easement is. Diana threw in there, we have EASE plus Y plus ER is rewritten as EAS, replace the E, convert the Y to ER, easier. So one of the things of spelling out loud, which you could do like, I don't even know how many hours, days, Pete spends teaching people how to spell out loud, and saying these word sums out loud. And that's part of his work. And we could honestly do a whole chunk on how you say word sums out loud. But I want to highlight a couple of things here that obviously you folks have brought up, and I think bear some level of conversation. Thank you, Lana, because you just figured out the next one I wanted to talk about. Pete loves to talk about this particular word family because of the word disease, and how it actually is dis-ease, or like not comfortable, right? And so it's one of those times where understanding the word parts and where that word, or the base of that word, can really help us out in maybe deepening some understanding around some of those other words. Okay, so a couple of things that have happened here. The first one is, we talked about just a little bit. When we look at the word sum EASE plus Y, we are, excuse me, we are removing the E and replacing it with the Y. The reason we're doing that is because in this case, in the base word ease, the E is there as a marker. And so how you figure this out, it's a huge process. Not always, but in order for something to be a marker, it can't produce a sound in any of the words in the morphological family. So as soon as it becomes pronounced or used somewhere in the family, then it's not a marker. But in this case, I'm telling you it's a marker, because if we look at the phoneme grapheme correspondence, ease. So I hear two sounds, ease. So I have the EA coming together, as we know it does, to make a long E sound. And then I have a Z sound that is coming from an S. And in fact, when we hear Z, the phoneme Z, it's almost always an S that is making that sound. So we've got an E on the end that does not appear to be doing a job when it comes to the phonology of the word. And the reason the E is on that end of this word is a plural canceling E. So unless it's plural, unless it's more than one, we like to avoid having an S, a single S on the end of a word, so that as we're reading, remember spelling's all about meaning, as we're reading, we can quickly know that we're not talking about more than one E, whatever that would be. But we're talking about E's, not plural. And so E, one of its many jobs, it's one of the most common markers in our English spelling system. So one of its jobs is to cancel plurals. If it's not a plural, so we throw an E on the end so no one gets confused while they're reading. So in this case, because it is a final non-syllabic E, when we're adding the Y suffix, which in this case is acting as a vowel, we are getting rid of that E and plopping on the Y suffix to create the word EASY, easy. Is that a clear enough explanation? Yeah, okay. The other one I wanted to show you, which led, oh, maybe I didn't even put it on here. Okay, I didn't put it on here, but I'll talk about it right here. So any idea why ES is the pluraling suffix here and not a single S? Don't worry, like I had to look it up.
Is it because when you say eases, you actually hear the es sound, or I don't know, because this technically this E should be silent. I don't know. That's just a guess.
You're on the right track, Cindy. So E, the pluraling suffix is considered E in brackets S. The short form of the suffix is a single S. And we are to use the short form whenever possible. However, because we have a syllabication change when we add the suffix to go from ease to eases, we have changed the number of perceived syllables in the word. Now, syllabication is a really funny topic in the land of orthography, because there is no direct correspondence between perceived number of syllables and actual number of syllables in spoken language. The best example I can offer to you is the word camera. If you look at the word camera, and we're gonna like clap out our syllables together, we would clap out 3 syllables. Cam-er-ah. No one on earth goes around talking about their camera when they're going to take pictures. It's the camera. So there's a distinct difference between perceived syllables in written words and actual spoken sounds. And again, that could be a whole other conversation to have. But in this particular case, because we've changed the syllabication of the word from ease to eases, we need to use the es, or the long form of the plural. We have that final non-syllabic e at the end of ease, and so it will be taken out and replaced. And so what's actually happening here is the e off the base is removed and the es is added. If that
Charlie,
um
do you see Erica Lynn's comment
okay,
in the
sorry,
chat
yes.
there?
That's right. So we would end up with the spelling error, right? If we had the double e's. And so again, we need to make sure that we're maintaining other spelling conventions as we start to build out word families. It's a great point, Eric Lynn. The other one I wanted to talk to you about is the changing of the Y to I when we spell the word easier. So a couple of things are happening here. We've already talked about ease to easy. Y and I are like BFFs. So when you teach and talk to your students about vowels, and that's sometimes Y situation, this image here is a really great way to illustrate it to your students. If you have larger kids and you don't want to use a hand, like just spell the 5 out of the top, but put the Y underneath the I in the second row. Because Y and I like to help each other out and take on each other's jobs, for lack of a better term. So in this particular case, because the Y is in the, I'm going to get this wrong. Let me read it from my notes. Okay. Y is considered a vowel because of the long E sound we hear at the end of easy. Da, 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 da. We changed the Y to I because it's considered the final position in the base word because of that suffixing that happened, but internal within the whole word. And because it's internal and the Y is not preceded by a vowel, which means it's not part of a vowel digraph, we replace the Y with I and add the suffix on the end. So this could be one of those situations where you introduce this suffixing convention to your students and then ask them to go out and see if they can find other examples where the base of the word may have ended in a Y, and now we've made a change and the Y is now an I as we've added another suffix on. I've linked this in the slide deck notes, and of course you get these in the follow-up, but this flow chart explains the suffixing convention related to the final Y. And so that's like a nice little thing to have in your toolkit to help explain to students about what's going on here. Now, one of the other things that we avoid in this whole Y to I BFF situation is we don't like to have double I. Now, this is where it's really important that we're using the words conventions and we understand about how conventions are written because it allows for some loopholes to exist. So, no complete English word ends in the letter I. And now you're going to be like, but what about taxi? And what about ski? And what about the word high? Well, the reality is ski is a loan word from, I think, Norwegian. High is an exclamation and it's considered almost slangy. And so it doesn't follow into this complete English word part of the convention. And taxi is short for taxi cab. We've shortened that compound word. And so, yes, there are exceptions, but actually what we're finding is they don't fit the criteria for that convention anyway. So we can dig more into that at another time if you're interested. Now, this naturally leads us into a conversation around homophones, which was what I intended to talk to you about today anyway. It just became backwards planning in my world. We try to avoid creating words that are spelled the same but have different meanings. We try to avoid that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the homophone principle in just a second. But if a word already exists, then there are times where we don't follow certain conventions, certain suffixing conventions. So the example of the word whole, like HOLE, plus the suffix Y to talk about the condition of my socks, holy, versus holy as in sacred, we have two different spellings so that no one's confusing my holy socks with my holy socks. And so that is not following the conventions because we're trying to make sure that it's all about meaning first. And so we have that distinction in words so that that meaning is clearly communicated. Okay, 5 minutes left to keep the mind blow happening. If we run out of time, I'm happy to pick up where we leave off next day. So you're all familiar with the alphabetic principle, I hope. Otherwise, that's really going to derail us. So for most students, this is like the light bulb aha moment that turns them into little tiny reading sponges and writing sponges. And this idea that the sounds in spoken words, the phonemes that we hear, can be matched directly to letters in written words, the graphemes, and vice versa. We can write letters in a certain combination on a page, and someone else knows what we're talking about. And we can see something on a page and we can read it and we know what they're talking about. It's like the miracle of the written language. That's the alphabetic principle. Quite often, that's kind of where we stop talking about certain things related to our orthography system. And when I was introduced to the homophone principle with Pete Bauer's work, I was like, where has this been living my entire life? Because it really just clarifies everything. And the homophone principle is this: where possible, words that are pronounced the same but are unrelated will have different spellings to mark the differences in meaning. In other words, having multiple graphemes that make the same phonemes is a feature of English spelling. It's not a bug or an error or something wacky. It's on purpose. And so we need to have graphemes that are making the same phonemes so we can distinguish homophones when we're reading. Otherwise, we're going to be in a hot mess. P.S. My children are busy screaming at each other in the other room, if you happen to catch that at all. So here's what I thought we were going to do today. What I thought we were going to do today, I was going to have you pick a couple of homophones and you're going to build out the word families. And then you were going to, do some what do you notice, what do you wonder? Well, friends, some of the homophones that are out there do not word family nicely at all. And so very quickly, this activity was like, but it just so happens that I selected a word family to play with that appears to be violating some of those suffixing conventions that we talked about just moments ago. So here we have, wrong button. I thought I could do something. Oh yeah, laser pointer. Here's where we're at. Okay, so here we have DIE as in death and DYE as in going to my hairdresser's. Okay. recoloring something. Notice here, when we've added the ing suffix, something has happened to the I. Oh, for the love of Pete. So what's happened here is because remember that double I rule, can't have double I's? Y has tapped in for its buddy I to be in that place so we don't have a double I in that word. Die, dies, no syllabication change, right? We don't say dies, die, dies. So that would just be an S, not an ES that's been added there. Over here, again, we have what appears to be a going against the convention where you've got an E and an I hanging out together. But the reason we're doing that is because we can't confuse dyeing our hair with the act of death. And so we keep the E there. Dyer, we would add ER, but drop the E. Interestingly enough, the act of cutting with a die, like a, you know what I mean? Like a shape cutter, like a Cricut cutter, you know what I mean? Cricut machine. If you're talking about the act of cutting, the act with a die, it's DIEING. So there's another dyeing in this collection of spelling. You can also have dyer, DIER, as in one who dies. But that felt really weird. And so I did not list it because I couldn't think of a time when I would ever be like, I'm the dyer. Like it's not a phrase I would typically use. So sometimes you can pull up collections of words in a word family, or in this case, 2 word families, and invite students to make observations that they then go dig into. Why is it that the DIE base word converted to a Y? What's going on there? Why did that happen? Or you could also use this just to highlight and do some direct instruction. Hey friends, I found this really cool thing that we do in English spelling. Let me tell you about it. I know you could sell it just like I can. Okay, I am mindful of the time. I want to leave you with this friendly reminder that the most frequent cause of misspelling is basing it entirely on what we think is the sound and in total isolation from its relatives. We need to know where it fits morphologically within a family to best spell the word. Again, reminding our students that that idea that we have multiple graphemes that can spell the same phoneme, that's like it's an add-on. That's like the Chrome package when you go buy your car. It's a selling feature. It's not a deficit. I've added a couple new things to our resources list here. I just purchased this book, Once Upon a Word, Word Origin Dictionary for Kids. Would totally fit in a Div 2 and higher classroom. I really like the way it's laid out. Really nailed that intended audience for children. I've listed here a connection to the Linguist Educator Exchange. I really love Gina Cook's resources. She builds, it's a number of sets that she has, but they're sight words. And then on the back, she unpacks other ways that it is affixed. It talks about where it came from morphologically. It talks about its meaning, and it talks about its pronunciation for each one of those sight words. And then she's got some other pieces that are on there as well. This morphology project is new. You have to put in your email address, but they've built a bunch of slide decks that help highlight different prefixes and suffixes. Please, for the love of all that's holy in the world, do not just put it up as a slide deck and read every prefix to your students and call it a day. No one thinks that's a good time. But it is a great way for you to build your understanding and perhaps highlight and go on word hunts for specific words that are matching those prefixes or suffixes. So use it sparingly. I'm passing it on to you as trusted educators who will make informed decisions with the resources that we share. Have fun. Go on, see what you can do. Find a friend. Talk about some word origins, or at the very least, pick a resource from that slide deck, from the slide earlier, and do some investigating. See if